Hi there, this is Josh at Fairview Hardware. Today we're going to make a Mississippi pot roast on our Primo ceramic grill. So I have loaded my firebox with fuel just about up to the air holes on the firebox. You can see that in there. I have used a quick start light right there just in front of where the draft door would be. You can see it's right there. That is the only spot I'm going to light on this because we're going for a low temperature cook. You can see I've got some chunks of mesquite towards the back of there, so after this takes off a little bit, it will slowly give off some smoke from those as the fire spreads to the back of the firebox. So it is lit. I'm going to let it sit here lit for about 5 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and throw in my heat deflector plates and my drip racks and my grill grates, and then I'm going to go ahead and close the lid of the grill after about 5 minutes, and then we're going to let this thing come up to about target temperature we're looking for is about 275 today. Okay, we have a 2.5 pound chuck roast. It's been patted dry. It's coming up to room temperature. And all I'm going to do is sprinkle some kosher salt and fresh ground pepper on it. Not real heavy, just a light coating on the side, on the top of it. Kind of get it all over there. About like that. That looks good. Now we're going to flip it over. You hit the back side. And there's no measurements on this kosher salt and pepper here. You just don't want to go too heavy with the kosher salt. And I don't like the amount of pepper on there, so I'm going to blast it with some more pepper really quick. And then before we're done here, we want to just take a little bit of extra sprinkle and put it on the plate. And then we're just going to pick it up and we're going to kind of get the sides a little bit. Just make sure it's seasoned all over. So we got a pretty good coverage on the top, on the bottom, on all the sides. Get that side a little bit. And we're going to let this sit while our grill comes up to temp. And here we are about 5 minutes in. You can just see some coals starting down in there. That's perfect. We don't want any more than that. So we will go ahead and put in the drip racks and the heat deflector plates. We're going to throw the grates up on top of the grill, and then we're going to go ahead and close it up with the draft door open a little and the daisy wheel open a little too. But remember, our target temperature that we're shooting for is about 250, 265 is what we're going for. Okay, fire is going. We've got the drip racks and the grill grates in. This is what I'm going to leave my daisy wheel and my chimney cover on. You can see it's a pretty fat crescent moon there, and then the daisy wheel is wide open. And we are going to have this draft door open just a little bit more than 2 fingers. So I'm going to do it just about like that. This would be all the way, so maybe a little bit less than halfway closed, just like so. And we will keep an eye on the temperature, and when we get close to that target temp, we'll go ahead and bring out the meat. Okay, our grill is up to temp. We're going to go ahead and put this big slab of meat right over here, just across the heat deflector. Keep it away from that seam in the middle and away from the edges, just to make sure it gets a nice even heat. And what we're doing here is we're actually smoking this to partially cook it and to get those fat and connective tissue ready to render down in the Dutch oven later, but we're also doing that to add a whole bunch of flavor. So this will be a really flavorful pot roast, a lot better than you can do in the crock pot. A little bit more work, but a lot more flavor. So the meat is on, closing up the grill. We're going to close up that chimney cover just a little bit more, a little bit tighter crescent, but still have these wide open. Close down the draft door just a hair. And we're going to wait for this to come up to our target temp. Once we have it locked in at about 250, 265, we're going to go ahead and adjust our doors and make sure everything is stable. And we're going to let it sit for about 2 hours. All right, so we'll check back then. So this is about 1 hour in. You can see we're picking up all kinds of flavor. Look at that pink smoke ring on there. We got a whole lot of flavor. It's just now starting to render down that connective tissue. And the fat, we can see there's some pools of that beef fat melting real nice and slow. It's kind of self-basting at this point. This is going to be amazing. We're going to lock in a whole lot of flavor here so that when we transfer it over to the Dutch oven and we really try and break it down and get it nice and soft and fork tender, we're going to lock in all that flavor. It's already in there. Now, if we were doing this in the crock pot, we'd get that fork tender, but we wouldn't have all this extra flavor in here, all this little, just tasty. Look at that. That's crazy good looking. Can't wait. We'll check back in another hour and put it in the Dutch oven. Okay, it's been about 2 hours. At this point, our chuck roast is going to be fully cooked. We could eat it, but it would be pretty tough. Flavorful, but pretty tough. So what we're going to do next is basically we're going to braise it off. We're going to about 2 hours on a low heat. We're going to braise it closed up in this cast iron Dutch oven. If you have a stainless steel Dutch oven, you can use that as well. You can see in the bottom of my braising pan here, I have got ringed up onion. And then I just have some chunks of apple. And my goal here is to not add any liquid, but to add some things that will break down into some liquid. And so the onions and the apple ought to break down pretty well into some liquid. So what we're going to do is take a peek at the chuck roast that's in there right now. We're going to pull it off and put it into the Dutch oven, and then I'm going to rearrange the grill so we can fit the Dutch oven in there. And we'll come back after that point and we'll talk more about the Dutch oven. You're probably wanting to get a look at what that chuck roast looks like at 2 hours in. So we can see that that redness that we saw earlier is much more evenly distributed throughout the cut of meat. And remember, this is red, not like raw meat. This is pretty firm to the touch. It holds up. It would be real tough to cut into this and eat with a knife and fork. Not that some people don't eat steak that way, but that's not the goal here. The goal, you can see the color on the bottom. It's real good color all the way through. But this is what it looks like 2 hours at about 250, 265, somewhere in that neighborhood. Never got really over 265. But we're going to go ahead and put that in the Dutch oven, and then we'll come back with the grill reconfigured. Okay, so you saw what it looked like at 2 hours. This is just at that 2 hour mark, taken off the grill and put into the Dutch oven. And we're going to finish off the seasoning portion of this here before we start the braise. So what we're going to add to this is a half a stick of butter, just kind of nestled right there on top. That is going to render down with the rest of the fat from the beef and give us a nice rich gravy at the bottom. Next, we're going to season with a few spoonfuls of powdered beef bouillon. We're not going to go too crazy with it. We don't want it to be ultra salty, but we do definitely want to bring some salt into the mix here, other than that little bit that we sprinkled on. And this will mix with the butter and the rendered fat and the moisture from our onion and apple down in there. It's going to make more of an au jus, more of a sauce to spoon over this meat. And then we're going to add a little bit of my secret ingredient here. It's just really hard to find. Black garlic salt. I've only seen it in the wild a handful of times, and so when I see it now I try and grab it, but it's basically, if you're not familiar with black garlic, it's very, very slow cooked. And when I say slow cooked, I mean like over multiple days, like a month usually. 6 weeks I think is what it takes, in an extremely low heat, a whole head of garlic with the paper on. And you just let it sit at really low temperature, and basically it kind of ferments and slow cooks, and it gives you this really, really rich but mellow still garlic flavor, a little bit of tanginess and very salty. And so this is salt. The salt that I'm using is salt infused with that black garlic. It just adds a little bit of extra oomph to everything. So we're going to can this thing up and we're going to put it on the grill. Okay, we're going to take a quick peek here. We're about an hour in to the braise. Let's see, I don't want to leave this open for too long because I'm going to lose all my good liquid, but you can see how this thing is starting to fall apart even more. We see these deepening cracks in here where more of that connective tissue is starting to render out. Still got a good bit of liquid down in the bottom. If this gets too low, it's going to scorch, and we don't want that. But we can see there's a good mixture of melted butter, rendered beef fat, and liquid from the onions and apples we put in there. But it is looking good. We got about another hour and a half yet to go until it's fork tender. But it is looking really, really good. Put some of those drippings on top. So we're going to cap it back up and let it cook. Okay, we got about a half hour to go on this thing. I wanted to show you guys something. First of all, you can see there's a little bit more liquid in here. I added just about a quarter cup, just because it was starting to get a little low. I don't want anything sticking or burning to the bottom of the pan. But I wanted to show you that this is definitely like fork tender now. You can see this thing is sinking right in there. We've lost that firmness that we had before. You can see I can pull off a little chunk here if I wanted. It's softened up a lot. This connective tissue is just about broken down. But what I wanted to do, got the crazy idea to add some potatoes. So I got a little bowl of just the smallest little red potatoes I had, just little guys, smaller than a chicken's egg. And all I'm going to do is plop those in the liquid around that chunk of meat. Just kind of squeeze them in there where I can fit them, just so they're mostly submerged in liquid. Get them all the way down in there. And then I'm going to cap this thing back up and give it another little while, maybe another 45 minutes at the outside, just long enough to steam and get these potatoes cooked and that meat just to finish off a little bit more. So we'll check back when it's all done. So about 45 minutes after we added the potatoes, and you can see they are quite done. Very soft and tender. The reason I didn't do them from the beginning, I'm sure if you've done a crock pot roast with potatoes and stuff before, when you do it all day, when you let them sit there and slow cook in those juices and rendered fats all day, they get kind of waterlogged and they just don't, they're not an appealing mouthfeel. It's not what we're looking for. So these were just done. They were braised in that liquid until they were just done. They're going to have a lot better consistency to them. The flavor is going to still be present and kind of on the outside. It won't be cooked all the way through. That's a sacrifice we're willing to make since we want that good consistency on the inside. So we'll pull all these potatoes out, and then I want to show you something to expect when you pull this meat out of here, because you want it to be fork tender. You want all that connective tissue broken down, but you don't want it pre-digested. You don't want it so soft that it's like a paste, which can happen in a crock pot. I'm sure that has happened to some of you out there before, that you've overcooked something or it's gone a little longer than you intended in a crock pot, and things start to just fall apart almost to the point where they're pre-digested or pre-chewed for you. And I like a little bit of texture and a little bit of crunch and a little bit of chew in my food. So there's our potatoes looking really good. Move those out of the way. But I'm going to show you, this thing is fully cooked, and you can see if I were to pick at it here, I've already pulled a piece off to eat it, and it's delicious. I mean, it'll shred real easy, but we can get underneath this thing with these metal tongs, and it's still in one piece. It's starting to go, but it's still pretty solid, which is a good sign. It's a sign that we cooked it all the way through, and we got it fork tender, but we didn't overcook it. We didn't lose that nice little textury chew that we're going to have to it. But you can see just with my tongs, I can get right in there and just pull this stuff apart. So what you do with this after is up to you. Tonight we're going to put these on little submarine buns and do little steak sandwiches with little shredded cheese or sliced cheese on there. This could easily be served as a pot roast, carve it up and cut slices or chunks for everybody to eat. You could take this and have leftovers and put them in a soup or a stew. You could put it into flour tortillas and make beef tacos with a little bit of grilled onion and pepper. We do have all this lovely, lovely liquid in here, which make a great au jus. It could just be thickened just a little, but you can see all those onions, and the apples are non-existent. They have broken down completely. Those apples are long gone, but we can still see some strings of onion. But all of this is full of flavor, so even if you didn't have a use for it right now, bottle this stuff up, throw it in the fridge. You can re-render it later, and you could pour it over something if you've got something you need a quick gravy to go on. So that's all we've got for today. That is our Mississippi-style pork roast done in the Primo grill. I hope that yours comes out just as good.